What's up, guys? This is Brave, and I'm back with another review of Tylerperry Sistas. This is season 2, episode 13, and the episode is titled Let It Be. Let's go ahead and talk about this episode because there are a few things that need to be unpacked. So we start this episode off right where we left off on the last episode. Gary and Aaron, they end up leaving the bank while the other ladies are still there. So Danny, she's trying to be supportive. She's trying to, remind Andy that Gary, he put her through all this stuff, but every time that she tries to say something, Sabrina and Karen, they keep cutting her off, like, oh, because, Danny never says anything at the right time and all this stuff. And she's like, I'm just trying to say that, Andy has been through enough when it comes to this Gary situation. And, she was saying that she shouldn't be going through this. Like, you've been through enough. You shouldn't be going through this. And out of nowhere, you have Andy and Karen starting to list all the guys that Danny has dated before. And I'm like, wow. So the time that she's actually trying to be a supportive friend and give you the honest truth, that's when y'all want her to shut up and go to work. Okay. Cool. That's how y'all gonna continue to treat Danny, which makes no sense at all. So after this, we see Fatima, and she's in her office, which clearly she has a new office because at first she was working the front desk. So we see she's in her office, and Hayden ends up coming by, and he brings her some receipts from the houses that they work on, with the ex-convict program that they have. And she's like, you usually don't do this. Like, that's somebody else's job to go pick up these receipts. And he's like, oh, well, I went to the houses last night, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, so did you go to the such and such address, which is the one that Zach was at? And he's like, yeah, I was there. So this is when she realizes that Hayden probably talked to Zach. So he ends up going on and on to Fatima about how she needs to basically stop dating around and that he's the best thing for her. And he's standing right there in front of her face, but she doesn't see it. And I'm like, Hayden, we've already had this conversation multiple times at this point. This woman does not want you. You need to let it go. So after he leaves, Fatima ends up calling Zach, and she's asking him, did Hayden come through there? And Zach, he doesn't want to say anything. He's like, doing the whole Zach thing where he wants to keep everything to himself, and he doesn't want to say anything because according to him, it's going to cause more problems. So he finally ends up saying, Hayden did come by. He said that he would get me kicked out of the program. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to handle it. He's like, no, don't get involved with that. Just leave it alone. And she's like, no, I'm going to handle it. And that's going to be that. So Fatima actually wants Zach to come back to her house. She's like, I know you're tired. And he's like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, girl, why are you out here begging Zach, who has nothing? Like, if he want to be, sleeping on a park bench, let that man go sleep on a park bench. Like, at this point, it is annoying that Zach and Fatima are having this back and forth banter of him always thinking that he doesn't need her help or he doesn't want to accept her help. Like, okay, if you don't want to accept it, go on with your life then. So he finally agrees to come back to her house. And next thing you know, we have Andy. Andy shows up to work. She has a funky attitude. She goes to Fatima and is like, well, can you bring some papers to my desk or whatever? And Fatima, she keeps it cool. She's just like, oh yeah, of course. But Andy gave her a full-blown attitude. I'm like, Andy, she's honestly my least favorite because her attitude is trash all the way around. So when Andy actually goes into her office though, Miss Irene is there and she's cleaning the office. And, Andy's like, well, why are you guys here right now? And Miss Irene is like, oh, there's a bug going around, so they wanted us to clean, during the day. And she ends up telling Andy, like, by the way, Paris is around, and for them to basically avoid each other And she's like, I had to clean up Paris after he came home, all busted up from fighting with Gary. I'm like, that whole scenario with Paris and Gary and Andy, I'm not even going to go into it. So we next see Karen. She gets to her shop, and I mean, Karen looks good. She has on a really cute top with her jeans on. And Pam ends up showing her the credit card statement, and she's like, what are these charges? I think it was like $5,900 worth of charges on her business credit card. And Pam is like, oh, well, the bank verified that it was Zach who did it. And I'm like, how did they do that? Like, did he order something online and it was shipped to him? Like, how? I'm not understanding how they verified that it was Zach. But whatever. The next thing you know, Karen is blowing up Zach's phone. He ain't answering. Why is he not answering? Because he's having a conversation with Danny. And, she's just still trying to figure out what he's doing. And as Karen is blowing him up, he looks at the phone and he ends up blocking her calls. He ends up blocking her phone. And, Danny is trying to get him to take Karen back. And she's just like, no, because I made a bet with Sabrina, so I just need you to get back with Karen. He's like, nope, I moved on. She should be happy. And Danny basically is like, what's up with this new woman that you have? And Zach ends up letting her know that, his new woman makes him feel like he can get things done and that he can be a better version of himself and that she doesn't talk down to him. So Danny, she just really wanted to win that bet. There's no other reason why she wants Karen and Zach together. So while Karen is still calling, trying to call Zach, she thinks that he's basically doing this because he wanted to be spiteful. And honestly, I don't think that Zach had anything to do with this. I mean, Zach can be a lot of things, but I don't think he has anything to do with this. Next thing you know, out of nowhere, because, Karen was talking to Pam about Zach being spiteful and that he really did this. Pam's new man shows up. And was it me, or did he look just like Tammy Roman's husband, Reggie? To me, he looked just like Reggie, but I don't think that was him. Pam, like I said, her man shows up and he said something, and she's like, oh yeah, baby, she just got an attitude because her boyfriend ran up her credit card or whatever she said. And I'm like, why are you telling your boyfriend, who shouldn't be at your workplace, this other woman's business? Like, I'm surprised that Pam even still have a job, but I guess. So we next get this scene of Jacoby and Maurice. So Jacoby, he comes over to Maurice and he's asking him for some help. Maurice don't want to help him, and he basically told him go ask Sabrina and all this stuff. Of course, you already know Maurice was out here being rude like he always is. And out of nowhere, Jacoby's like, oh yeah, I think Sabrina likes me. And some type of way, he didn't realize that Maurice was gay. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you knew that Maurice got beat up and attacked because of what reason? Did you think he just randomly got attacked? Did you not think that it was a hate crime? I'm not even understanding. So they're going back and forth, and Maurice is trying to tell him that, there's gay people who play sports and all these things. And I'm like, why are we having this conversation? It doesn't make sense. Nothing Jacoby was saying was making sense to me about how, well, Maurice, you're a bigger dude. I didn't think you would be gay. So I didn't know that gay had anything to do with weight limits. What do you think this is? A roller coaster? Whatever. I could have done without that scene, honestly. So Jacoby, he finally ends up going to go ask Sabrina to explain something to him. And she's like, I'm not understanding why you're not getting this, because this is a simple task and all this stuff. And he's like, just explain it one more time and I'll get it. So while they're having their conversation, who shows up at the bank? Calvin shows up at the bank. He ends up giving Maurice his key back. And, I mean, I'm just assuming that he must have made, like, a second copy of the key. That's why he was returning it to Maurice. But who knows? After that, Calvin, he ends up, not Calvin, Maurice ends up noticing that Calvin is wearing his cologne or perfume, whichever Maurice tends to wear. And Maurice is like, don't be touching my stuff, don't be wearing my stuff. And I'm like, Calvin, why would you even wear Maurice's things? You just moved in. Like, why are you doing that? So Maurice is like, don't touch my stuff, especially not my toys, because I know how you get down. I did laugh at that. So, they're going back and forth, and he even says, like, oh yeah, because, he started making like this buzz noise, and Calvin he's kind of upset. He's like, that's what I be getting upset with Sabrina about. And basically, he gets upset with the fact that Sabrina is always telling his business to everybody else. Like I mentioned in my other reviews, Sabrina stay telling somebody else, whether it be Maurice or Danny or the other ladies, that, oh, well, Calvin does this. Like, Calvin wears women's underwear. Calvin wears perfume. Calvin is doing all these things that is not exactly normal. So, next thing you know, Calvin notices Sabrina and Jacoby, they're having a conversation in her office, and he's like, who is that? And Maurice is like, oh, well, he's just somebody who works here. And, at this point, Calvin is in his feelings because Maurice basically tells him that Sabrina wants to sleep with Jacoby. And I'm like, why would you even put that in the atmosphere? But whatever. We already know Maurice is very messy. So we have Karen. She shows up to the airport and she talks to Danny. She's like, where's Zach? And Danny's like, I don't know. How am I supposed to know where Zach is? She's like, well, you have a phone. Call him. She calls him, find out that Zach is cleaning out a plane right now. And next thing you know, they done broke every protocol that the airport has. And Danny takes Karen onto the plane. I'm like, she just walked past all these people and nobody said anything. Nobody stopped them. Nothing at the airport. Okay. All right, Tyler, if that's what you said. So she ends up, on the plane with Zach, and she is like spazzing. Okay. Karen brings it up to Zach that he charged $6,000 on her card, and Zach, he does not know what she's talking about. Like, he's like, what are you talking about? I didn't do that. And, she's like, well, I'm going to go to the police about this. And he's like, I didn't do nothing. He basically tries to involve Danny in this. And he's like, Danny, you ain't going to get your girl or whatever. And Karen's like, nope. Danny, don't you say anything. Don't say nothing when it comes to the situation. So Danny, she didn't say nothing. So Karen is like, I want my money now. And then she tells him that she regrets the day that she ever met him. And he's been nothing but a pain to her. And this is the line that got me. She said, even him taking a knife can't change that. Even though he got stabbed for her, she still regrets the day that she met him. So he then says that he should have just let her die that day. I'm like, you know what? There's no coming back after this, because the words that they exchanged in this argument, yeah, there's no coming back. There's not going to be no more Karen and Zach ever again, or at least there shouldn't be, because this argument, that was the end all be all. Like, we're done. Karen ended up saying that she wished that she never wants to see him again. And he says the same thing back to her. Like, he's like, we're done. Like, this is it. And Karen ends up saying that she threw out his grandfather's things. Because I guess he must have had, like, another box, probably in, like, the closet or something, left at her house. And she's like, yep, I put it on the street. And whoever gets it, they get it. And that really set Zach off. Karen, she don't even care though. She doesn't care about his grandfather's things. And he's like, you know what? F you. And I was like, woo. He said that with his whole chest. He said that with his heart right there. And he even says F Danny for bringing Karen there. I'm like, ooh, now their little friendship is it's a bit messed up as well. So after he leaves off the plane, Danny comes up to Karen. She's like, are you sure that he did this? Like, you need to make sure that he's the one who did this, because you can't come back after all the stuff with what y'all said and the grandfather thing. And Karen's like, Danny, are you ever on my side? Like, you need to be on my side. And she like storms off the plane. And I'm like, Karen, Danny is always on your side. She's always trying to convince Zach to do right by you. But you clearly don't see it that way because you don't like Danny like that. So after that, we get back to Andy and Fatima. So Fatima ends up coming into Andy's office because Gary is blowing up the phone line. I mean, he done called 17 times and he calls every 5 minutes. So Andy says to Fatima, like, what do you think of all this? And Fatima's like, well, do you want the work me or the real me? Like the real answer. She's like, I want the homegirl version of you. I want the real answer that you would give me. Keep in mind, she'll take, the truth from Fatima, but she damn sure won't take it from Danny. Fatima says that the situation is messed up and that Andy has worked too hard to let him run game on her, as well as, all the things that came with Gary. She's like, you need to go ahead and set him straight, as well as have everything, fixed in the office so that people aren't looking at her crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I can believe people are definitely looking at Andy crazy. Like, girl, you were messing around with this married man. Then you took on his wife as a client. Next thing you know, your assets are frozen because he's a scam artist. Like, it's too much mess. Absolutely too much mess. So when Andy asks Fatima how many times has she been in love, she said once, and the guy he actually was getting married to his ex on her. Like, they were dating, and next thing you know, this guy is just randomly dating his ex and they get married. So Andy's like, oh, now I see why you're the way you are. And Fatima is like, well, I promised myself that I would never get played again. So Andy's like, well, I don't want to be like you, Fatima. And I'm like, you don't want to be like Fatima? Girl, nobody wants to be like Andy. So Andy starts up about how Gary is perfect for her. And Fatima's like, but he was married. And Andy's still trying to go on and on. And Fatima's like, how could you even know someone who was going home to their wife? Like, he basically, was one way with you, but that wasn't the full Gary. You didn't even get 24 hours with this man. Because Andy was still trying to go on and on about how he was so great. And Fatima's like, no, he showed you who you thought he was, not who he really was, or whatever. So then Fatima ends up opening up about Zach, but not saying, his name. She's just like, oh, I'm into this guy, and he's really testing me. And, she's like, I'll keep you updated on, if things go further with her and Zach. But of course, again, like I said, she never said Zach's name. We next see Sabrina. She gets a phone call from Danny, and she's just telling her about this whole Zach situation with the credit card. She's like, I don't think that he's the one who did it, but Karen is trying to send this man back to jail. So, she was just giving her girl the update, and then she got off the phone with her because some people were walking up. So we see these two trailer park trash looking white men who look like they were the type of people who went to the Capitol. I'm just gonna say it that way. And these two white men, they come to her desk And one of them is like, yeah, that's her. And then one of them, he's like, oh, look here, you black bitch. I'm like, what? Whoa. Where's he going with this? And he's like, you won't be dating my baby brother. And if she continues, there's going to be hell to pay and all this stuff. So we learned that these are Preston's racist brothers. And they're just here to, I guess, play regulator on Danny. And that was pretty much where the episode ended. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode. Go ahead and like, comment, as well as subscribe. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.